Hello, it's Mrs. Smeggins, and we've been working on listening to our reading voice and thinking voice and recording the thoughts of our thinking voice. We've talked about a couple options so far. In previous lessons, we talked about when you read one text and you can't write in the text, you can take notes and just use the simple T-chart. Jot down what the text says, what were the key words, and what did it make you think? Okay, then we talked about, but when you can write in the text, annotation is so much easier because you don't actually have to write down what the text said. It's in the middle, it's on the page. And so you can just put your thinking voice thoughts right next to those words. It's so much faster. But both of those options only work for one text. This lesson is about, well, what if you have to read 2 or 3 texts all on the same topic, all on the same issue? Something has all 3 or 4 of these texts related. And then you have to write about this information, right? Because that's what readers do. We often record our information or record our thinking because then we have to write about our reading and we want to be able to reference it. Okay, so this lesson talks about, so how do you take those kinds of notes? What would it look like? Okay, well, first, you definitely don't want to annotate. You don't. Not when you're juggling multiple texts, because I don't care if it's different pieces of paper, different texts on paper, or different tabs on a screen. You're going to really struggle to see the details when you're ready to write. You're going to struggle to see the details across all the text because you're constantly juggling or shifting paper and looking around. It's so much better if you can actually take notes on a single document for all of the passages. But the T-chart won't work. No, because you got to keep track of which detail came from which source, which text, right? Because don't you have to cite your sources? Yeah, that's what readers do. You can't just say, according to the passage you read for, which passage? All right, so we've got to have a different way to take notes, lift our details outside of the text, a different way to do that, and maintain it as source specific. So we're gonna do a little bit of this, but it's gonna be formatted in a different way. Let's look more carefully here. So we're definitely taking notes, okay? Not annotating, we're taking notes. And we're gonna do it with multiple texts. And do you see how this is set up horizontally? Let's look at your screen. This is how I would take notes. When I was reading multiple texts, this is how I would do it, okay? And you don't have to use a worksheet. You don't have to use this document. You can just use scratch paper, all right? But again, if you're reading several texts in resources on paper, or even several texts online digitally, you want to make sure that you're taking notes and it's all on one place, okay? And so just draw lines. Okay, that's source 1, details from the first text. All right, text 1, source 1, S1. Okay, these are going to be details from the second source. Okay, or you can write article, essay, speech. Okay, but you have to know which details came from which source because readers cite their sources. So we're going to really work on this idea of taking notes outside of the text, but keeping it source specific. Okay, so as I add this here, let's kind of set up a little scenario here. Let's just pretend that you had to read several texts all about binge watching, okay? And so there's this text, and then there's these 2 visual texts, which are memes. We learned that you can read visual texts, all right? And anything you can see and touch, that is a reading voice detail, all right? What the text says, what I can see, okay? But I can still have thoughts about visuals and videos. We've talked about this, okay? So let's just pretend you had to read that previous text, these 2 visual texts, and then this 4th text. And let's kind of set up the fact that you would have to write, after reading, you would have to write, and this might be what you have to write about. Describe 3 symptoms that convey someone has likely crossed over from just watching a lot of Netflix to truly binge watching, okay? What a fun topic. All right, so we're not going to read them right now, all right? But we'll pretend that, okay, I'm going to read those, or I am reading those, or I have read those. And in terms of that format, that chart, how I would actually record all this, I use the top to just put the prompt. See, that gives you a reading purpose. So you want to take notes on things that will help you answer that question. You don't take notes on everything, just what's going to help you answer that question. All right. And then again, as I've already mentioned, you're going to have source 1 details separate from 2 and 3. Okay, so here's what it's going to look like. Remember, when we did the T-chart, we couldn't just write down our thoughts. We had to know, well, what caused the thoughts? What did the reading voice say? What text clues, what details actually caused us to think like this? You're going to do the same thing. And you're going to jot down those details. If it goes with source 1, you're going to jot it down in source 1 in that row. This is what the text said. Boom, got it. But remember, we want to make sure we're thinking about the text and tracking, recording our thoughts, putting them down. And so when we did it on the T-chart, we just put it on the other side of the line. Okay, wait, this line is not now put your thoughts down here. No. Anything for source 1, for the first text, goes here. And so this idea that, well, this is what the text said, this detail, great. So remember highlighting? Why are you writing it down? Why is it important? You gotta add that part. That's your thinking. So once you have that thought, we gotta write it down. But do you see that if you then write down your thought right next to it, a day from now, later this day, you're not gonna remember if the text said both of these, or if the text only said this and you thought this, particularly after you start really filling this up. So we got to do one more thing. We've got to somehow differentiate text says reading voice details from thinking voice details. And for me, the secret is to simply use parentheses. Just whatever you think about it, well, and it has me thinking this, bam, put it in parentheses. Got it. Now I'll know. Anything in parentheses came from my thinking voice. Okay. Sometimes you jot down 2 or 3 details. And then remember the bracket in annotation? All right. What are you thinking about it? So every detail doesn't have to have a thought, but these details led me to this thought. When you put it in parentheses, you can tell what was reading voice and what was thinking voice. And the T-chart, it was separated by that line. You didn't have to worry about this. But now we're kind of merging reading voice and thinking voice together for each source. So the parentheses will help. Okay, so if you keep going with this approach, then you finish the first text, then you go on to the second text. And again, these are the details that I gleaned, okay, that I think will help me answer this question. And this is what I'm thinking, why I think they're going to be helpful. And so you just keep going source by source. That's what you would do. All right, so let's try it. Let's try it, and I'll do it first and just kind of show you how it would look. Now, I've done some scribbles here, but I'm going to go ahead and use this chart, okay? And remember, you don't have anything to write until you read and have a thought. Taking notes is step 3. So put your pen down. You don't need your pen. All right. So you have to read, you have to think, you have to have a thought, and then you got to figure out how can you say that thought in as few words as possible. Okay. So here we go. Binge watching requires sitting for hours and hours. If the viewer is hooked on a show, they're more likely to sit on the couch eating unhealthy food and snacking. Okay, let's just stop right there. Okay, because I'm already having a thought. Okay, so let me just tell you my thought. All right, so sitting for hours and hours, I read that. And then unhealthy food and snacking. And so all of this has me thinking that a sign of binging is you just kind of feel like a blob, because when you eat all that unhealthy food and you just sit around, you're so tired, you feel like a blob. That was my thought. Okay, I better record this. So now, again, this is the first source. So I write down snacking. I write down unhealthy food. Okay, sitting. I'm just going to write sit/hours. I know what I mean. All right, remember, abbreviations. Do it quickly. All right, so now I can do a big bracket. I can do a big set of parentheses, but just this idea of you feel like a blob. All right, you're tired and you feel like a blob. Okay, those were my thoughts about those details from the text. See the difference? Okay, let's have you try it with me on another one. Let's jump to the second paragraph. One study found that binge watching was related to poorer sleep quality, more fatigue, and insomnia because of pre-sleep arousal. In other words, getting very invested in the characters and plot of multiple episodes right before bed leaves the viewer thinking about the show more and unable to sleep. Okay, let's pen down. Let's just Okay, so this pre-sleep arousal, because you were watching and you're following the plot and the characters, and you have insomnia, you can't sleep because you keep thinking about it. Okay, so those were all the details, but what do they mean? Well, like, do you know, do you ever feel like this, or do you know somebody and they're like, they can't stop thinking about it? And so they dream about it. It's like their only thought. It's like all they talk about. And so when that's all they know or all they talk about or all they think about, what does that tell you about those people? Maybe it's you, but what does it tell you? Yeah, they're like living in a fake world. You do know those characters aren't real, right? They're not real people. Yeah. Okay, now let's jot some of this down. Okay, we've had lots of thoughts. Now we got to say it quickly and succinctly. We're still in source one, so you stay up here. All right, and so let's jot down this idea of insomnia. Okay, and characters and plot, and the idea of thinking about the show. Okay, I'm just jotting that. Characters, plot, insomnia, thinking about show. All right, so what was our point? Yeah, they're like living in a fantasy world. All right, so they're not living in the real world. I'm just going to put RW. I know that means real world, real world. I know. If you don't, write it out. But not living in the real world. They forget that these aren't real people. Okay, so we're doing it. Okay, now remember, we've previously learned that text isn't just print text. If we move to another source of one of these binge passages and we had to do the visual, the meme, this is the second source. So now my thinking and my reading voice details are going to go here. Okay, the other meme goes here and the other print article. So everything has its own space. You got to keep these separate. Okay, so remember what we learned previously in an earlier lesson about whatever you can see or touch in a text, in a visual, that counts as reading voice. Okay, so if you can see it and touch it, it's a reading voice detail. It's what the text says. And then what you think it means, well, that'll be your thinking voice. So I see that it says lies I tell myself. I see that it says just one more episode. I see her hair is half up, half down. It's kind of all of it doesn't, it's going in different directions. I see black under her eyes. I see orange around her lips. I see orange on the collar of her shirt. Okay, let's just stop right there. So what does it mean? Again, we don't have anything to write down until we have a thought about the details. So I'm gonna do the hair. Okay, I'll focus in on the hair. Okay, so her hair, I'm going to source two. So now I'm in source two. Her hair is part up, part down. So I'm just going to up, down. Got it. Okay, and it's stringy. Okay, and some has curl, some curled, some not. Okay. And so who cares? What's my point? I'm going to put it in parentheses. You could put it in a bracket or you could put it in parentheses. So what's my point? Well, okay, what am I thinking about that? Well, I'm thinking she has not done her hair in a while. I'm thinking that maybe that hairdo was like from a couple of days ago and it's just slowly falling out and she hasn't moved. I'm thinking she hasn't washed her hair. All right. Let me write that down. I don't know that, but that's what my thinking voice is telling me. So I write it down. So I imagine she hasn't showered, so not showered. Let me jot that down. Okay, she's definitely not brushed her hair. Okay, and so we write those down. We don't know that, but it's pretty apparent in my thinking voice. Okay, you try it. Let's focus in on the face. Okay, the details we see, the black under the eyes. Okay, the orange around the face. Let's focus on those two things. So what's it telling you? Okay, she hasn't washed her face. It's old makeup. What about the orange? It's her snacking. She didn't even use a napkin. She's like totally lost all her manners. Let's write that down. So the black by the eyes, I can touch that. Okay, the orange by the mouth, that's a detail I can see. So those are reading voice. And so now what I want to do is put in parentheses what I think it means. I'm thinking that is old makeup that this girl has not washed off her face. I'm thinking that she has snack residue all over her mouth. And she's just no manners. Okay, these are all my thoughts. Just because I saw a couple details in the text. You see what we're doing? When readers need to record their reading voice and thinking voice so that they can use the information later, like in writing, but they're reading more than one text. We don't want to annotate and we don't want to use the T-chart. We want to use this format, okay? And you don't have to use this thing, okay? You don't have, it doesn't have to be a worksheet, it doesn't have to be a handout. You know what you could do? You could just draw lines on blank paper. Just draw lines. Source 1, source 2, source 3. Boom, done. You got it. Bullet point the details from the text, reading voice, and put in parentheses what you're thinking about them. Done. If you wanted access to a more digital document, then here's this. It's ready to go, and you can just type in. Let me zoom in again. You can, for each source, you type in the detail. Okay, it said this, and I was thinking this. Put it in parentheses. Boom, done. Got it. Okay, or if you wanted to use it as a Google Doc, boom, same thing. You just get your text box, you drop in your text box, and then, okay, so the detail in the text was this, and I'm thinking it means this. Boom, got it. And I just keep going. Next detail, or detail plus detail plus detail. I read all those details in source 1, and it's got me thinking that, boom, type it in. Got it. Good to go. Done. But remember, keep source 1 separate from source 2. Every day, readers will read multiple texts, all on one topic, and to use that information later. And when they do this, they're very careful to keep reading voice and thinking voice separate and information per source separated as well. Now, if you were in Mrs. Smecken's class, here's what we would do next. I would actually have you read all 4 texts on binge watching. Okay, so this first one, which is a little longer, okay, read 2 visual texts. We only did part of one of them. And then the excerpt from a 4th source. You're going to read all 4 texts, and you're going to use some version of this form, okay, paper, digital, whatever you want, and I want you to track what details, reading voice, cause you to think what, thinking voice, and I want you to keep it source specific, okay? If you were in Mrs. Smecken's class, that's what you would be doing, but your teacher might have a better idea.